Before I'm going to start the sculpting process on the door, let's have another look at the UVs we have made. Going into UV editor, and by turning on this blue button, you can see that everything that is red is something that we have mirrored. And we've done that because we have duplicated the left arch over to the right side. So all of these textures are mirrored on the other side. And because they share the same UV space, we only have to sculpt half of the pillar in order for the other half to have the same texture. So it's not necessary to sculpt the other half. So I'm going to delete this part. And also I'm going to delete the back of the door. I've modeled this in so that we cannot see through the wooden planks. And now I'm only left with parts that aren't mirrored. But as you can see, there are still some parts that are a darker color that are overlapping. So these are just copied. And for example, I've made these bolts and they are not necessary to be sculpted except for one. But I might actually sculpt some detail onto the iron bar here. For now, I'm just going to decide to keep this part, and then I'm going to see if I'm going to sculpt some detail on there later, or if I leave it like this. Let's see if there are any other pieces. Yes, of course, we only need one of these because we have only made one UV for this one, so I'm going to delete this one as well. And this is what we have left. So I'm going to export this model, and then I'm going to start the sculpting process on this one. In this tutorial, I will be skipping a few steps because when I talked about the pillar, I've already shown you the most essential steps when it comes to sculpting our rocks. So in this one, I'm going to be focusing more on the wood creation and on the metal sculpting and leave the rest up to you. I've already gone ahead and dynameshed my model so that the overall resolution is consistent. And next thing that I'm going to do is, again, I'm going into polygroups. I'm going to auto group my model. Now that this is done, I can again go into my separate pieces by holding Ctrl Shift and click the one I want to model on, like this, and I can isolate it this way. Okay, I'm going to start to sculpt the rock parts, and I'm going to expect you to do the same. If you don't remember what we did, I would advise you to go and see the pillar tutorial again, because the shape we have on the left side of the arch and the bigger pieces are going to follow the same principle. Okay, I've already gone ahead and sculpted my stones like I did in the pillar tutorial, and I've already completed most of the wooden planks, and now I'm going to show you on the empty example how I am sculpting the wood, and you can recreate this process for the other planks that are left. Okay, let's isolate this by holding Ctrl Shift and clicking on the object we are going to sculpt. And I'm going to start by using the Trim Dynamic brush again, turning on the Cube Alpha, and I start sculpting, like with the rocks, the edge damage in. But for the wood, I'm really just doing this very loose and very dirty, and I'm pulling in some dents and some more straighter lines, so that's really looking more natural, and I don't worry too much about how this is looking, because wood can be chipped away, and when there's some hard edges in there, it looks like something has chipped off, for example. So with wood, this is perfectly fine. like this. And this is already good. We're not going to clean this up like we did with the rocks because I don't want hard and clean edges. I want chipped off and dirty pieces like on actual wood, even though this is stylized. And don't be too afraid to add some more damage if you like. Something like this is already perfectly fine. Just bring back the old model. Like you can see, I've done this also to the other areas with wood chipped away, and then also some cleaner surfaces like here. Okay, next I am going to put in the cracks, and I do this with the help of the lazy mouse tool, and you can find that in the stroke tab. Lazy mouse, turn on lazy mouse, set the step pretty low, below 1, and the radius to a higher number, let's say like 17. See how this works. And what it does is it helps you stroke a straight line. So as you can see, it follows this red line and is kind of chasing it. And you can customize this distance with the lazy radius. So the higher you put this number, the longer this line is, and the more control you have, and the more cleaner shapes you can make. But of course, this is not how wood looks like. So I'm going to revert, and I'm going for something around 15, pick 17 like last time. Just to show you what the lazy step is, it's basically the distance between the brush strokes, so you can have some nice patterns like this. Maybe if you invert it, you have something like cloth, like a cloth pattern, cloth stitches. Okay, now for real, we go into stroke, we set the step back to 0.1 is fine, and then we start painting in or sculpting in our cracks. And by doing that, make sure to really make use of the tablet and the pressure sensitivity of your pen. So if I go and just make a straight line like this is boring. We want some variation in there. So as you draw, I want you to mix up the pressure while painting, so have some deeper areas and some slimmer areas, so we create some more deeper cracks and more thinner ones, and this gives us some nice variation in there. And I'm starting to add just a few, maybe 2 or 3 big cracks to get some of the main features into the wood. Maybe there's one that's split it away from here. And another thin one coming down from here. Well, maybe something like this. Then next I'm keeping this brush and I go smaller to add some finer detail. And this is just to give us some nice contrast between the big strokes and the small ones. And again, you should really make use of that pressure sensitivity. As you can see, it's fairly easy to create something that really looks like stylized wood. Let's make this one a bit longer. and maybe have some go away like this. Okay, then next I'm going back to my standard brush. I make sure the lazy mouse is off, and I'm going to paint in some of these dents by hand. If you have some open spaces left that could need some more detail, then you can draw these in maybe on top of a line. Okay, then I'm going back to my trim brush and I'm picking out the bigger parts and sculpt them away a bit so that the edge is not so straight, because this is wood after all, and not this is wood after all, and it's an organic shape, so there's a lot of imperfection in there. I'm mainly doing this for the bigger shapes or the bigger cracks. Make sure to do this to the rest of the object. Okay, as you can see, I didn't do this to all of the cracks, so there are still some finer lines in there that didn't get any edge damage. So there's a nice contrast in between bigger lines, finer lines, some destroyed, some have holes, and some are just kept like I sculpted them in. Lastly, if you like, you can of course add some dents in there. I'm just doing this to keep our style consistent, because you can find these also on all the other pieces we have sculpted. And there we go, this is our wooden part of the door. I'm not going to sculpt the back of the object, because as you remember, there is a solid piece behind it, so you cannot look through. So all I have to worry about is the front of the piece. And up next, we're going to sculpt the last part of the door, which is going to be the metal part. The last thing I'm going to show you is the metal, and for this one we are going to isolate this first, and then, as with the other pieces, I'm going to trim the edges, but I turn off the alpha because I just want a bit of a bevel on there, so that my next brush has a bit of an easier job to pick up the shape. Like this. And the only thing I'm going to do is get my trim smooth border brush, and I'm going to give this very sharp and clean edges here. And I'm also trying to get some in onto the open surface. And just like this, we are defining the three different materials we're going to use in our scene. So we have wood, we have stone, and we have metal parts. And if we use the same way of sculpting for all the assets, then we keep our scene and bakes and textures later very consistent. Okay, next, to add some surface detail on here, I'm going to mask away the edges. Turn perspective off. And I can also use the lasso tool for this. So I'm just going to do it like this. Cut off this edge. Maybe that was a bit too much. So that I only have the inside. And then I'm going to my standard brush, put it on a low intensity, and I'm going to very subtle paint some height differences in there. Can almost not see it, but then if I go over this with my trim smooth border brush again, and I'm being very careful, then I can add some metal-like surface detail. Actually, I'm not going to use the mask for this. But as you might be able to see, let's turn this on red, maybe this is better. What the brush does is tries to flatten the areas, and this gives me some nice sharp corners. That are going to look like metal. Actually, a bigger brush works quite well here. Okay, once I've done this, I'm just checking if there's any errors. So I'm going to fix a few of these parts. And there I have my metal piece. When you're done with this, give the metal bar some more damage, maybe fix some errors, and give the same treatment to the door handle, like I've done here. With a cube it was a bit easier to add all the metal parts, all the sharp edges. And for the bolt, I've just smoothed the outer edges and flattened and added a few more faces to the top of it. And once you've done this and you're happy, you can save the door, and we're going on to the next part.